Welcome back to the Belonging Place, where we talk about the importance of community, connection, and belonging. And I'm excited to have a friend with me today. And okay, so this is Braden. Braden, tell us a little bit about who you are and who are you?
This is great. It's like a work interview. You know, they always ask that question.
Yeah, tell me
about you.
Tell me who you are.
Yeah. So my name's Braden. I am a husband and father of two beautiful kids. I live in Palmer Lake, Colorado.
Okay.
Which, if you know Colorado Springs, drive 15 minutes west and you're right up against the mountains. And then close your eyes, think of like a Hallmark movie from like 1990. And that's what it is without being 40 minutes from Costco. It's literally like we light the star on the mountain during Christmas with the fire department. You come down, you count down. So
my sister lives in Netherlands. Are you from the Netherlands? It's outside of Boulder.
No.
Okay.
I feel like I should.
They have this whole Dead Man Festival every year in like Netherlands. Yeah. There's like this frozen man in like a shed or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, Colorado's beautiful.
That's awesome.
What brought you guys to Colorado? Are you from there?
I am.
Okay.
So I was born in Sandy, moved to Colorado when I was 8 months old, then left at 19 years old after I graduated.
Because we know each other from your wife and you guys met here in Utah, right? Or no?
We did.
Okay, yeah.
I hesitated because I stalked her online. That's
okay.
So actually, I met her because she's posted her music video, and I was just like, I have to get to know this woman.
Yeah, and if you guys see her listen to music, I can see why. I mean, it was not a surprise to me that you guys found each other. Okay, your last name is Eads.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit, EADS, just for those who are listening.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. That's a unique name.
A unique name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The etymology, or like, where's it from? Or...
So it's weird. So I did like 23andMe.
Okay.
So my dad's side comes from Poland. It's not a Polish name.
Okay.
But I am mostly Scandinavian.
Oh, okay.
Right. And so I actually couldn't tell you where Eads comes from. I'm not quite sure. So
okay.
if my mom and dad are listening to this, they're going to be like, we failed as a parent.
You better go find out.
Yeah. but I do know I'm Scandinavian, and my dad's side comes from Poland. So my dad's grandma, who we called Nana, her last name is Kutz. But I think that's the most recent Polish name that we know of. But yeah, Scandinavian and Polish.
Okay, so you said you were married.
Yeah.
You're married to a beautiful redhead.
Yeah.
Which is also unique. 2 kids. Tell us more about you.
Yeah. I've been in what's called customer success for over 10 years. So it's like a fancy name for, you sign up for a subscription, you spend lots of money on a product. My job is to make sure you buy that product again for hopefully more money. That's kind of like,
got it.
But I thrive in building deep relationships and solving difficult problems. So I mean, when I now interact with clients at an enterprise level, which just means like I get a really small book of business, which means I get to be really, really personal with people. So my whole like shtig in life is it's building those deep relationships. And even outside of work, I like to blur the lines between personal and professional relationships in what I do. So I have a lot of when I can stay in touch with my clients after I've been their point of contact and we've moved on companies, we can still stay in touch. That's when I know I did my job right. We or if they come to me and they say, Braden, I have a non-insert company name related question for you, where we build that trust and stuff. So with that, I've then had this passion for over 10 years in public speaking, right? And I've tried multiple times to like figure out how I want to do this. Whenever I talk to people, I'm just like, okay, so I never bought or like built a business and sold it for $20 million by the time I was 25. I didn't climb Mount Everest with no legs. Who is going to hire me? And so
everyone, I want to pause before you keep going. Everyone seems to think, because of what's been modeled, that like you have to be a big producer or you have to be a victim of a like tragic story in order to have a platform, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Unpause.
And with that, I talked to
Sounds like you had that kind of.
I did.
Also.
Absolutely.
Like a scarcity mentality that was like, until I have one of these 2 things, who am I?
Yeah.
The reason why I'm saying this, and you know this, and I know this, but not everybody who's listening knows this. The reason why I'm bringing this and stopping and pausing is because there's a whole lot of people out there that still have this scarcity mentality when it comes to public speaking, or maybe even writing a book, which is what a lot of people that I meet feel like. I don't have a big enough story. I haven't had a big enough tragedy. I don't like that sort of let go of their lived experience because some evidence that they see that like these are the stories that sell, or these are the things that happen, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we also have a whole bunch of evidence that tells you that like books are being read all the time from people who don't have like what you would consider this big tragedy or this big fall. They're like authors that are sitting in their rooms dreaming up fantasy stories, right? Like there's something for everybody. And but yeah, I think this mentality is fairly common and unfortunately like prevalent in the world. So yeah, so you're one of those people, and then what happens?
And then I am. And then I met a woman named Julie Lee, who was an elementary school teacher and a successful public speaker. So I said, you talk to me. It was like, tell me how you did this. And she said, can you tell stories? And I'm like, yeah. You know, well, are you funny? And I was like, I think I'm funny. You know, a lot of other people decide
I can be.
I can be. And she said, then you're going to be great. You know, and Kylee, you have stories to tell. All the listeners here have stories to tell. My wife has stories to tell. My parents have. Everybody has stories to tell that the world needs to hear.
You're not bad on the eyes either. That helps.
Oh, thanks.
No, for real though. When you're going to stand in front of a bunch of people, right? Like, you're a good looking guy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so because of that, like, I was just like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to build something.
She blew permission into your sails.
Absolutely.
She was like another person just saying like, hey, you can do it.
Yeah. And I literally was shaking talking on the phone to her because finally I was just like, this is the thing I've wanted to do for 10 years and I'm going to do it. So I mean, that's my big thing is like, okay, so I've been in all about human connection, and I'm sure we'll talk more about even more why personally that's really, really important to me. And then being able to use my stories, my experience, both professionally and personally, to put together a message that, I mean, it's my life's passion is to enable people to build human connections that last and are deep.
Yeah, I mean, this is why you're sitting right across from me, right? We're friends, but also saw each other recently at a conference.
Yeah.
And when I was like, oh, he's building a brand and a message that's like what I'm all about, I was like, let's have a seat at the table.
Yeah.
Before we jump into all of that goodness, I am going to ask you the same question I asked at the beginning, which I said like, who are you, right?
Yeah.
And you told us a lot about things that you've done and some things that you have, but I'm going to ask you to strip all that away. And I'm going to say, Braden, who are you if you don't get to talk about any of the things you've done or really any of the things you have?
Wow. I like to tell people, hi, my name is Braden. I'm a nice guy in recovery. That's one. That's a big part of who I am. Stripping away all of those other things from another, I love learning about space and science and all the nerdy things that come with that.
I love that.
I you know, people say when you die, what's the first thing you're going to do? And I'm like, man, I'm going to a black hole, or I'm going to watch a star explode. Like that's the first thing. Sure, I'll go visit George Washington and Jesus and all those things. But anyway, so that's
space. Okay.
I have always been mesmerized by the stars and the skies and how things work. And aside from that, like I am a soul that is longing to connect deeply with other souls. And from my connection with my wife, often that is through music. I believe music does what words alone can't and falls short. But being able to connect with somebody soul to soul is a huge journey and passion of mine.
Love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you opened a door that like maybe we'll start. There's a lot of halls and doors in your life that we could open. You said that one of the things you are is hello, I'm in recovery.
Yeah.
I'm just going to open a very broad door, and I'm going to say, tell me why that is an identifying feature that you laid on the table.
Because I think for me growing up, right, there's a lot of things especially from our religious context. I grew up LDS, where there's a lot that comes from that upbringing that involves selflessness. And I call it knight in shining armor syndrome, right? So it's like I'm giving to others selflessly, right? I'm constantly giving myself to other people. I'm constantly putting others before me. And, the leaders that I was surrounded by, I don't ever remember advocating for themselves, but rather giving of themselves to other people. So I was like, oh, I want to be like that person.
And like, if we dig a little bit in, are you specifically talking about they were doing callings, or they were in positions of leadership where they weren't getting paid, or they were showing up things, or what are you talking about?
A little bit of all
giving,
of it, right? So there's like scripturally
just to give some audience perspective
from like a biblical background, right? All those figures within the Bible or other things, like you long to be like, oh, well, they're completely service centered in giving of themselves to other people. So that's like one part of it. But another part of it was in the culture of where we were surrounded, you always said yes, right? So people ask you to do something, you're like, I will go and I will do, right? That
almost like no, wasn't available, right? It
Yeah.
always is available because we believe in agency at its very core.
Yeah.
But there sometimes seems a culture of like, this is the only answer, right? Yes.
100%. And you
say jump and I say how high. Okay.
That's perfect. That's exactly how it is. And you wouldn't see conflict. You wouldn't be able to observe how conflict is modeled and handled, right? I can count on one hand the number of arguments I watched my parents have, right? Like it was just never modeled for me.
Can I take a pause really quick and just say, one of the ways in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that I really saw what you're talking about happen over and over and over again was missionaries. So missionaries would go and serve a mission, and they would go through, there was joy, but a lot of challenging. Yeah. This was, different challenges at different times. I feel like I'm a dinosaur that served an LDS mission, but like, compared to like the missionaries and what they do, but like it is leaving your home. It is, but when somebody would give their farewell, they were stoked. And when they came home, they kept the sort of facade, I guess you could say. Sure. I don't know. It wasn't 100%. Always a facade for people, but like that everything was good. Well, if you read any of their letters, and some of those, most missionaries just left out the hard parts, even in their letters, right? Like if you had a chance to talk to somebody, there's a lot of it's not super exciting. There was a lot of just doldrums, I would call them, or just like monotony on a mission. Yeah. But you never heard about that. Right. You never saw that as a kid. You never, you wanted to be a missionary because it sounded awesome and you wanted to serve the Lord. But this, I'm just exemplifying for you just another way. I don't think everyone was told, like, don't speak the truth about your mission. But there was just a modeling that said, like, and there was kind of a scarcity mentality that says, like, people aren't going to want to go if they know how hard it really is. So just like tell them the good highlights, right? Yeah. I just did not love that. When I came up from my mission, I just didn't want to talk to anybody for like a year and a half. I was like, don't talk to me about my mission, because I did not want to have to do the highlight reel. My mission was amazing. And then it was also so hard. Yeah. And so is everybody's, right? Uh-huh. Anyway, I got on a tangent, but I'm like, but this kind of idea is what it seems like you're kind of saying, like, there's a thing that's happening behind the scenes, but no one's talking and seeing the thing. They're just seeing this presentation. Right. Everything's great. Everything's hunky-dory. And especially when we talk in the context of mission, like one of the biggest unspoken things that you can do to stain your reputation is come home early. Oh yeah. From that mission, right? So then the motivation to serve is to look good for others, right? Almost, it's like I can't stand the embarrassment of coming home early. I couldn't go my whole life and date women and be able to say, so where did you serve? Oh, I served in XYZ and came home early. Like that's one of the biggest, hardest things that you can do, where then this theme starts to arrive, not just in the mission context, but I think totally in my life context, where I cared so much about what other people thought of me. I need to be seen as. Right? Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, I need to be go and do. I need to be this spiritual giant in that religious context, but even professionally, I need to get the next title. I need to get the next salary. Oh, I need to do this in order to be seen by people I care about as somebody who is good and awesome. Right? It's heavy. So then guess what comes with that? There's a lot of baggage and horrible things that come with trying to be
a nice guy,
Yeah.
right? And some of those things are like withholding truth and not disclosing my baggage to people that matter, right? So it's like, here's what I'm struggling with. Here's what I'm having a hard time with. So,
Before you get into that,
yeah.
why do you think that is though? Why do you think, like from your own personal experience, I'm a therapist, so I sit with a lot of people, but like from your experience, that space, I think you have enough intelligence now where you're sitting that that like when I disclose, and especially if somebody can hear it and hold it, like that's the best connection, right? I think you even maybe had the concept of that when you were younger, right? But like why do you think that, what is that gap between I need to be seen as put together and good and all this, but I have all this stuff behind me and I can't really be both.
Yeah.
Or I can't let I'm both. Like from your experience, what is that about? What would you call that? What is that?
It's for me, it's the desire to matter. Right. I just so long to matter to world, to society, to myself. And we define what that is for ourselves. So as you're growing, right, you're getting, or I was getting, let's call them bars. Here's the bar. And this is what it means to matter. I need to be these things, right? And so as I define those things, right, and I want people to speak of me the way I hear them speaking about other people. So in order for me to be somebody that matters, I need to be those things rather than defining in myself what matters to me and what is mattering to me.
And if I'm off track somehow, like nobody else can know that. Like that's behind the scenes, right? Because I need to portray that I'm on track. Right.
I care more about how you speak of me than what I'm doing myself.
Or how you think of me even, right? Because like you don't really know all of me. We're saying like really you don't, right? Yeah. If you only know the good parts of me, you don't know me wholly, right? Like you just know the parts that I'm presenting to you. Right. And that gap seems to become bigger and bigger, right? Like the more need to put on the facade and the further away you get from like being seen in your total like wholeness, right?
Yeah, it's so fake, and it's like you can only hold that facade for so long before it breaks, right? And even then, I don't even know if I want to call it like breaking. It's only so long before your real true self comes through.
Sometimes whether you want to or not, hopefully like on your own terms, right? Like
that's
for some
the best
people,
way to do it. Yeah.
So in your story, like,
and so this is really fresh for me, right? So even like years into my marriage, like trying to figure this out, right? Where I'm able to speak up and actually share my mind and what I care about and voice my needs, and being able to say, disclose to my employer when I missed a deadline or when I didn't do things right. Like these are all things of like disappointing people rather than showing up as the superhero, right? Was just like so unfathomably possible to me that I was like, no, or to be found out, right? Where it's just like, I have real human characteristics that are pretty darn common, but I want to matter and I want to be different. So nobody can find me out. But the surprising thing is when people find you out, they probably love you more.
Tell me more about that. There's such a fear on the other side of that is not going to be true.
Yeah. Here, let me get real. You ready to get real?
Yeah.
So it's actually a keynote that I'm putting together, right? I, along with
Sign me up, by
I
the
know,
way.
right?
I'll be there.
with 80% of other men struggled with a pornography addiction, right? And when I was 7 years old, that was my first exposure. It's not even fair, right? And to be found out that this is a part of me and my past, nobody can ever know. Nobody could, among many other things, nobody could ever find this out. Right. And
which we call shame.
Yeah.
Right. 100%. I mean, we kind of named that in our.
Yeah. And so that's kind of like one of the really big parts that drives this kind of duality of personalities, right? I have you that I'm me that you see, and I am me that you could never find out about. And we just pack every undesirable characteristic of mine into this part of me that can never be found out. So, I mean, I don't want to say I got good at hiding that part of me, but I think there's an element of all of that in us where it's just like our undesirable parts of ourselves that we're scared to share because we're not sure how people are going to handle your baggage.
Ooh, and I want to pause there.
Yeah.
Okay. Because while I think there's many people that are going to hear this that have their own I usually say unspeakable things, but things that they want to hide. I think that people don't talk enough about this, what you just said, which I'm going to repeat. It isn't always that people feel so shameful about the feelings that they feel, because many times you're just like, you can to yourself say like, I've made mistakes, or I am stuck in a pattern that I know isn't healthy, but it doesn't define me. You can sort of figure out with yourself or even with your maker or whatever, kind of like, but there is this thing that is felt that like, I'm not sure people can handle that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I have created a place in our friendship, in our marriage, in our whatever. I'm this person. I'm the dependable person. I'm the whatever, I'm the funny person. I'm the whatever. If I tell you this thing, will that change the way that you look at me and define me, right? And I don't want that. It's sort of like when best friends decide they're going to like date. Maybe they don't want to lose their best friendship, right?
Yeah.
But I see this when it comes to addiction. I see this when it comes to religion feelings. If you're like having a faith, I call them faith questions rather than crisis.
Ooh,
but if you're like having faith questions, anytime you're going to change, potentially change the way that somebody might see you differently, which already is a problem because you're already owning something you can't own, which is how people perceive you, right?
Right.
But we want to own that. We want to control people, and we want to control how they think about us.
Yeah.
And so just coming back to this place of like, maybe I do feel shame, maybe I do feel guilt, maybe I don't, but like, I don't know that me telling you might break it. It's probably easier for me to just keep being and showing up and the person you already know and already love and that you already appreciate. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, you touched on so many good things there. I think ultimately where the shame comes from, right, is basing your self-worth. Where is that going to be based? Based off of your perception of me. You can't ever find out about me because my worth is dependent on how you're seeing me, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It's external too.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely dangerous place to be. And you're going to spiral into these shame circles. And those who listen, who hear the phrase say shame circle, know what that circle is in terms of relapsing and different things like that. So in this journey, I had a very dear friend of mine, Brett Brady. I reached out to him and, was just like, help me understand this. And he sent me an article that changed my life forever by a doctor who in that article says, number one, okay, the root of this issue is not that I am a perverted human being that is destined to be number 3 on the next list of sex offenders that comes out of my neighborhood. Like I think a lot of people think of that addiction and feel like you're good. where that's going to end up, right? It's like if I pick up
like so far.
Yeah.
Like the extreme, right?
Yeah. I mean, John, by the way, bless his soul. You ever heard like the stick thing he does? I'll pick up one end of the stick. I'm going to pick up the end. Or you're just like, I pick up pornography addiction. I'm going to pick up being that's what I thought I was going to become, And then all of a sudden this article is like, listen, the root of this is a lack of intimacy and compassion in your life. First of all, that then redefined who I was as a human being. I am not an addicted pervert. I can reprogram my identity. Oh, I'm not addicted to this. I simply am addicted to number 1, dopamine. And number 2, it's like I have a lack of intimacy and compassion in my life. Intimacy and compassion come strongest when we are disclosing those hard parts of our lives to people we care about.
That are safe.
Which I was not doing.
Yeah.
100%. My mother, I'd come home from school, have a hard day. Hey, sweetheart, what's going on? How's today? I'm fine, Mom. I'm fine. I didn't want to tell her anything about what was going on. And I was...
Partly because, like, the culture. Partly because...
Bingo. Yeah.
You love your mom and you don't... It's awkward. Partly because... I'm not trying to speak for you, but I'm saying... Partly because, like... Then you have to worry about taking care of your mom's feelings about the thing that you just... It's just so much.
Yeah. So everything's fine. Everything's happy. Again, this idea of like, I'm good, I'm strong, I'm doing great. I don't have to tell you about how I'm struggling because every single example of who I thought I should be in order to matter doesn't do that. And so which
is also not true.
Right.
But from what you, right?
that's how I perceive it.
I want to open a door just quickly because we're in this. And I want to say that I went to like an addictions group years ago.
Yeah.
With a partner of mine.
Yeah.
And I walked in and all of the sort of church leadership was there. Women and men, by the way,
Okay.
in this addiction recovery group. And I never felt more of sacred ground than when I walked into that room. And this was like, for people who are in the LDS faith, this was like the Release Study president, the Elders Quorum president, blah, blah, blah. And everybody in that room was struggling with some form of process addiction, right? So that's pornography, that's disordered eating, that's gambling, it wasn't as prevalent back then, but like gaming, right? And I was like, if ever, this was before I became a therapist, but if ever I was to like bust out this, like obliterate this idea that you just said, it was that walking into that room. I was like, everybody. It wasn't everybody in my word, but everybody, quote unquote, right? Because you would never have said in the regular congregation that the Elders Quorum president, the Release Study president, and the second counselor, and the this and the this, were all struggling with. We're not talking just like having struggles. We're talking about like all we're saying in essence, like I am addicted. Like it's controlling my life. I need to actually do something. It's impacting me at this level. And I was like, man, I wish we could kind of roll back that curtain in more rooms and more places that people could, in essence, kind of normalize, not normalize the thing, because the thing, whatever it is, you need to figure that out. What's the root issue about that? Whatever the dopamine, right? Yeah. But it was wild how incorrect that notion that most people have that like how alone people are in their addiction is maybe the wrong word, but in their baggage or their unspeakable things that they think nobody else. And how many other else's that are also struggling in silence by themselves around you that you just don't know, right? This is how we keep ourselves ensconced in shame. Right. And this is how we are the easiest way to be disconnected, right, from people. And we think we're doing it so that we can help and protect and either ourselves or others. I think most people are really trying their best to like show up and be good husbands and be good partners and fathers and right. Like the not telling is coming for the most part from like a perceived, like you kind of said this, like a perceived need to be Captain America, right? Boy Scout. Yeah. I need to be seen as that because that's how you see me. That's what you've put up on me. That's what you need. That's what you married. That's what you wanted, right? Right. Because those are the people we saw when we were growing up. Yeah. And you said, in order for me to be like that, I can't be like me. And so you get to hear kind of in a way that you needed that like, you're not porn and porn is not you. 100%. And like, and even more than that, like, it doesn't define you. And even more than that, it's not actually who you are. And you do what with that? That seems revolutionary. It seemed huge. Like you said it was revolutionary. Yeah, absolutely huge. Completely reprogrammed my own self-identity in that aspect. In the years following, right, there are so many nice guy tendencies that came with that, right? And that wanting to hide. Nobody can discover my other skeletons I have in the closet. Also, I am very much a flight person when it comes to fight or flight, which means being able to learn how to face conflict, which means being able to disclose and tell the truth to people, even when it hurts and even when I can't control how they're going to respond. Honesty is more important than avoiding conflict. And the more opportunities you have to do that, the more evidence you have that people will love you no matter what, right? Yeah. But you don't know that when you first start. It's counterintuitive. It's right? A trust faith thing, right? Because like you don't know what any one of those they could also run away. Yeah. Right. Yeah. In fact, just at work, they were introducing all of us members of the team to the rest of the company. I started a new role and they would have these little taglines for each person. Guess what my tagline was? Everybody loves Braden. Right. Which is like, I'm a very likable person and that's what I like to be. But there's so many double-edged swords to that. Is Braden showing up authentically? Is he speaking his truth? Is he disagreeing when he's supposed to? Is he speaking up when advocating? Right. Yeah. And all of those things. So it was like the best, worst title I could have got. I was like, oh, okay. Especially in where you are in your life, you know, and where you're wanting to show up and be, the thing about where you are and what's so beautiful and what I want to like pause and take a snapshot for you in the future when you come back here is that like, it's so exposing. Like it's constant. You're like constantly exposing yourself
Yep.
by like saying, I need to grow and I need to change. Right. It's a lot easier to just like not want to grow and not like just keep where you are. Right. And I like want to ask you and say as much or as little as you want to say about this. It seems like this can't help but have spilled over into like your marriage or into your family. Like it seems like at a certain point you're going to feel a little, these are my words, but fraudulent in some of those relationships. If people think they love you or you think they love you, but maybe they wouldn't love me if they knew X.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you get this truth. And then what do you do with that truth?
When you say truth, you mean like when people are like sharing with me the things?
No.
Okay.
You get this truth from Brady that like is basically like, oh, I'm not the culmination of my worst decisions or my whatever. Yeah. I'm not porn. I'm not whatever. And so you now have this new belief, but you still have the skeletons in the closet, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, it's like, you finally learn and it clicks the work you need to do, right? And the relief of, oh, this is what's going on, and I'm a better human being than I thought, and then the work begins, right? And the work is never ending. Like, I think when you meet somebody like me, and there are a lot of people like me, hopefully the term they use is I am in recovery, not I have recovered.
Coming back to what you said, like this whole conversation came because you, when I asked you to identify you said this, right? Yeah. It's a part of your identity. And so this is why, is what you're saying. It's part of my identity because I'm ongoingly working on it.
And having the expectation that I will never arrive at a place, right? I think in terms of growth in humans, you're never going to reach perfection, right? And so it's a willingness, and that is a big word, by the way, and is super important to me in any relationship you have and in yourself, to always be willing. To be willing to take a look at your stuff. And that's a Jennifer Finlayson 5 quote.
And also not other people's, because can you control other people?
No.
Okay.
No, right.
Or can you make decisions for them? You can't decide that if you're going to tell your wife how she's going to respond. You can't, you can think that you can know her and you can impose ideas on them. And I'm curious how that had that information about yourself and then what the growth and the things that you're doing, what impact that had on the relationships closest to you.
Yeah, this is a great question. I feel like we could go like down so many avenues with how we're talking, but the willingness to face your stuff, to take a look at everything that's happening, finding your worth in yourself, and then not living for other people anymore. So this brings to about 2 years ago where I was talking with a friend, and his name's Colton Taylor. I hope you're listening because you need to know how powerful this experience was for me when I was venting to him all of the different things that come with nice guy syndrome and those issues that come up. And he saw it and he was just like, I see what's happening. And his response after I vented, he's a confidant of mine and one of the most generous human beings out there in terms of being non-judgmental and things. He's like, man, you just need to stop living for other people.
Oof.
I know. And I didn't even realize like I was doing that. Right. And then we had more conversations, and that's when I got the book, No More Mr. Nice Guy, and started reading. I think it was his recommendation to dive into this book where all of the sudden it's like, focus on what I can control. Right. Stop caring about what other people think and start living with integrity and aligned with what my values are. And at that point, I didn't even know. Like it was like, what do I care about? What do I care about?
Because you were not intentional.
Yeah.
Where your feet were, right?
You cared so much about what's the next move I can make to increase my own positive perception by whoever, right?
Which has got to be exhausting.
Oh my gosh. And I did it for over 30 years. Like, that's what I cared most about, like how I was being perceived by people that mattered to me instead of making myself matter to me.
Do you feel like there are people around you that kind of like could sense or feel the like incongruency that was happening?
100%. My elder brother, when I was talking to him about this revelation, he's like, yeah, I call you a yes man to other people. And I'm like, okay, thanks for telling me. Like, I don't think I was in a place to receive that if he had told me you're a yes man, right? I would have like defended
Timing
it,
is everything.
deflected it, and kind of stuff. But I was just like, man, and how good it feels to no longer care about like, I don't know how this person's going to handle whatever I'm about to say, or like if I disagree with something and stuff like that, where I like that release of just like, this sounds selfish, right? Because I was told my whole life to like give myself for other people, give my life to others and you shall find it. Right. And to be able, it sounds selfish to be like, now I care about me, but I don't think that's what it is. Right.
Can I feed you something back scripturally as well? I'm not a scriptorian,
bring it on.
All over in the scriptures, it talks about, feeling like take the word before you can give the word. Right. Like it's all over in the scriptures about take care of yourself. I will even go to the greatest commandments. The two greatest commandments are
love God, love your neighbor
as
yourself.
So what like I call it 1.5 or the 0.5 commandment is to love yourself. It's in the greatest commandment. So I just want you to hear me say, I know you know this, but I want to say like, yes, it is in the scriptures to serve and to like do it with grace and goodness and of your heart, and that we want to create Zion, we want to create oneness, right? And in order to do that, we sort of have to have this ability to like show up and share and grow in all the areas, right? So you don't have to be good at it, but you just have to be willing, right? But it's also all over in the scriptures. It says in order to do that, your cup has to be full. You have to be present. You have to have the word to teach the word. You have to love yourself to love your neighbor. And then you have to love yourself to love your neighbor to love God, right? And God loved us first. Therefore, we can then love, right? It's all over in there. This idea of like taking care of yourself so that you can take others. I mean, we talk about it in a worldly way a lot when we talk about like put your mask on before somebody else in an airplane, right? But it's all over there, right? It's kind of like it is the opposite of what sometimes people think, but it is the truth. The truth is you can't give from an empty place, right? Like how do you show up as a father or as a spouse or a teacher or an uncle or an aunt, or like how do you like give if there's nothing to give, right? Like I think that facade eventually, like people are going to see through it. It gets exhausting. I think sometimes people start to get resentful of other people who aren't showing up that same way or aren't giving the same amount that they're giving, right? They're like, you look around and you're just like, it starts to fall apart, right?
You kind of just blew my mind. Right. And I'm fortunate enough where I was not in a place where I didn't not like myself, if that makes sense. Like I was fine with myself, and I'm really grateful and lucky that I feel that way, but I didn't know myself. Yeah. Does that make sense? Right. So it's like, I knew what I needed to be in order to be positively perceived. And that's where my focus was. Or I knew who I needed to be as a husband in order to avoid conflict. Or I knew who I needed to be in order to have my parents' approval.
You kind of knew what you had perceived that had been modeled, right? But like, if I step off the path, that isn't modeled for me. Ooh, that's scary. And I don't know about that.
One of the biggest questions, one of my favorite questions, is you think about a behavior that you're doing. And you say, if no one else cared, would I continue? If nobody else cared what I was doing, would I continue this behavior? And then I was like, okay, well, no. It's like, I'd be different. But then it's like, the question is like, so what would I do instead? And I wasn't able to answer that question. I was just like,
do you know what it reminds me of? I don't know if you've seen the movie. It's like an old, Runaway Bride.
Yes.
But there's a scene at the end where she has all these plates of eggs, and she has dated all these, or tried to marry all these men and like become a chameleon with them, right? Yeah. And she didn't know. So that like the scene in the movie is this, I use this all the time actually in therapy and stuff. It's this crazy awesome scene where she's trying to figure out what eggs she actually likes because she ate whatever eggs the person she was dating ate. 100%. And it sounds like a little bit like you hadn't tasted the eggs.
No, not my own.
Yeah. So what does that feel like to like discover and realize and give yourself permission?
But to give yourself permission is a massive relief. It's a little bit overwhelming to go, okay, now I'm on this I'm in my 30s, for goodness sake. You'd think you'd be able to figure out who I am.
Listen,
and like,
we're all in our different timelines. Come on.
What to do.
Come on now.
And who we are as a person. And so first comes the idea of values. What are my values? Which I think are established to a certain extent. And to not be embarrassed to say what some of, number one, your values are, but what some of your hobbies are and what things you care about. Who am I? I'm a person who's a space nerd. I wouldn't be saying that into a microphone, or the fact that I'm, a pornography addict in recovery. Like, those are two huge things that I'd be like, nobody can find out about those.
What if they find out I'm a nerd?
I know.
That's my word, not your word.
Right.
But like, what if they do and they love you?
Exactly.
Because of it. Is like always on the table versus what if they do and they don't like me? This is the thing. Yeah. It's this and this. But most people think it's this or this. Right.
Or because we saw like our parents or other people, is just like, those are people who never engaged in, I don't know. One of the things I've always wanted to do is to do Dungeons and Dragons. Secretly, I'm like, that sounds really, really cool and really, really fun. And also, it's like the stereotype nerdy thing to do. I still have never done it before. So,
oh my gosh, friends in Colorado, please scoop them up.
It's like, if anybody
people do it.
knows,
I think you would be. I
think
you would be surprised. I have so many friends that their husbands, mostly men, I'm not saying women can't,
but
have D&D groups that happen once a week. How do you think it would not be that hard for you to find a D&D group?
I would love to, but it is that societal,
we're putting it out in the world,
nerdy thing that's like the stereotype nerdy thing, right? And to be able to just be like, no, that's something I want to do. And the end. And I think it would be fun for me. I don't care what you think or what anybody else's thinks. And to live with that level of freedom and confidence in yourself, like I try to think of like places in your body where you feel it, when you feel it in your chest and you feel like this gate opening up to welcome in a part of your soul that has been neglected for so long because you were afraid what others might think of that for you. So it's huge.
Here's the thing that the platform that I want to share and help with people is that when we are living our authentic selves and our true stories, the thing that happens is it like pours out of us onto everyone around us that we love. It is the best gift you give your kids. Those two beautiful kids you talked about at the very beginning, and your wife, is that when you are being your full self, and I'm not even meaning your good full self, when you're just owning, when your whole self is on the table, the good, the bad, the ugly, the better, when you come with the whole parts of you, and that not your best part or your worst part of you define you. They're just part of the whole of you, right? Then we can just do so much. Like, you give permission for your kids to be modeled in front of them that like whatever they like is fine. Like, they don't even have to think of it as like nerdy or not nerdy. Right. It's just like a thing on the table, right? It's just like a thing on the table. Their mom does music and their dad does D&D, and like, here's what we do, right? And on Sundays we might go to church, and maybe we don't. And that's wild. I guess what I'm saying is the gift that you give yourself is generational healing as well, right? Like, it's not just you, it's everybody around you. And talk to me about that, because I imagine that has been happening over the last couple of years.
Yeah. Like as a father,
just like in your marriage and and like, as you've come to better learn about yourself and who you are and taste the eggs, I guess we'll call it. And also like, put out your unspeakable things like publicly, not just like in your marriage, but like, like how has that impacted you? Yeah.
I mean, it's only brought good. I think, this is the belonging place, right? And I'm sure you're well familiar with Brene Brown's definition of belonging versus fitting in, right? Where you're able to show up in all of your realness, in all of your imperfection, in all of your growth. And people will relate to that far more than some superhero white knight on a shining horse who has no problems, right?
Which is actually unrelatable, right? Like, ultimately,
100%. And so that's when. So then we draw it back to connection, right? My firm belief is that the antidote for addiction is connection, right? And that's
my tagline, by the way.
Is it really?
Well, it actually literally was, and then the tagline for this podcast was the antidote to addiction is connection. But I didn't want to speak about addiction all the time.
Of course.
I wanted to talk about it enough though,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'm passionate about that's the actual anecdote.
Yeah.
And as a therapist, I wanted to put my like stamp of approval that like I believe that. There are lots of ways that you can help yourself? Yeah. There's tools and there's apps and there's groups. And I like think that they have a place for sure for people. But what I really know to be true is that the antidote to addiction is connection. And there's a lot of evidence that that's true too, right?
Can I give you a high five? Like,
yeah. But
Yeah.
tell me your experience to that though. Like, because was it hard? Was it like, were you tiptoeing in? Did you just like bust down the walls?
I'm still figuring it out.
Okay.
I'm still
Because
figuring it out.
this is the reality, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like you said, it's not an arrival. It's like, I'm a becoming.
Yeah. 100%. And it's like, sometimes it's two steps forward and one step back, where I need somebody, a third party, to go, Braden, you're doing it again. It's like you're going into your hole. You're not showing up with me. Like tell me really how you're feeling. When I was a people manager and I would start, one-on-one interviews, and there's another story for why I do this, but I sit down and say, how are you? And they're like, fine. And I say, okay, how are you really? Right. And I need people to do that with me too.
Yeah.
Right. And for people to go, people who know me will do that. They'll be like, hey, Braden, how's it going? Now I'll give them the spiel of like, everything's going great. This is awesome. This is awesome. And it's like, okay, but like, how are you really?
Peel back the layers. I mean, that's why I asked the question I ask at the beginning of every podcast. Tell me who you are. Now tell me who you really are. Like, when you take off all the dressings, like, what is left?
Yeah.
Because people are always shocked when I ask that question, because we just don't ask people enough. We just don't. They're called just like follow through questions, right? Like,
yeah.
How, I'm curious if you're figuring out who you are and you're tasting the eggs, or your willingness to kind of drop the cape, whatever we want to call that, if that also gave people around you permission to do the same.
I hope so. Here's the other problem is like, I'm also human, and it's imperative for me to also create that place of safety. That's such a fantastic question. So, one of the things I think about is my younger sibling, who I used to share a room with and sleep on bunk beds with and stuff. Like, there are a few people other than, my wife that know me better than he does. And we've had a number of really hard heart-to-hearts, right? And in places where I wasn't able to receive him as he is. One of the classic conversations we've had, he's an engineering personality. I am an arts personality. I am about presentation, and he is about logic and getting to the point, right? One of the big arguments we had for years was how you dress. Isn't that funny? So he was just like, I want people to accept me as I am in the way that I dress. And I'm like, that's impossible. It's like, you need to have a way to be able to present yourself. I was refusing to accept him as he is, right? And we've had a number of conversations since then where I still need to practice, this thing. If you know Mel Robbins, she's just come out with the let them theory, right?
I almost brought that book at a quote to talk to you today.
Gosh.
So.
And so it's being able to just take a step back and stop trying to push my reality, right, and the way that I see the world onto him to try and get him to accept my reality, and instead accept his, and be able to love him for his reality, and so he'll bring up things where he's like, this is something I've wanted to talk to you about, but I've been afraid of how you're going to respond, because
I call it like the turtle head, right? Like, or like the antler, like the little seekers of like a snail. If somebody in the world of like relationship stuff, we call it bids of connection, right? But like if someone's willing to like poke their head out or do that, and then you don't sort of get curious really quickly, or get listening really quickly, or don't create a safe space, they just turtle their heads back in,
right.
And and that's it. You maybe have to wait a while till you're going to have that conversation again, right? The magic of being able to just sort of table yourself for a minute and be able to like let that other person just sort of show up however they want.
Yeah.
Authentically and all themselves. If you can just like that pause, that ability, it's wild what happens in relationships if you can give them that. It doesn't even mean you have to agree or even have the same, you don't have to see things the
Right.
same, right? But it's something about being heard, being seen,
Yep.
and being understood. My favorite thing, I'm in the middle of reading this book, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite thing about it, I think most people talk, and she even says this, I think I saw her on some kind of clip, is that most people get really stuck on the let them part, and there's a let me part to this theory, right?
Yeah.
So like, let them make their decisions, let them show you their truth and then believe them, let them leave your life, whatever. That's most people think of as the let them theory. And the part of the let them theory is, the other part is let me, meaning what does that tell me about me? Or what do I need to change about me?
Right.
Or how do I need to show up? Or what do I need to do?
Right.
And I can only control me, right? So
Yeah.
like, yes, give people, but also, it's interesting. It's interesting as I read this theory that like how much people are a little bit afraid of the let, or don't want to talk about as much about the let me part, because it's where change happens.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people are scared to change, right? Like
Of
change
course.
is hard.
Yeah.
There's a growth edge to it. I think most people have a tendency to want to be in this homeostasis, good or bad, right? They just want to stay where they feel the most warm and the most comfortable and the most whatever, even if it's like not healthy, right? Because like if I grow outside of that, then something's going to change. And that change usually people think is going to be negative, right? What we find and what you're talking about for the most part, and if we've chosen the right people around us, right? Is that we become closer, we become stronger, we become synergized, right? Like now you know the whole of me and love me, and that gives you permission to be the whole of you.
Yeah.
And then we're like 1 + 1 is 4, right? We're actually better and stronger together because we're all our whole selves, and it's just like, I just feel like I always say permission giving, but I think it just has this domino effect. You attract people, right? Like that come into your space that are also craving and wanting to be their whole selves, good and bad, all of it, right?
I love so much of what you said. And one thing that you said that's super powerful, right, is being able to disclose your whole self to someone. This is all of me. And I'm scared to share all of me with you because I'm not sure if you're going to love me still. And how powerful it is when you can share all of yourself with somebody and they say, I still love every part of you. With that, I think of my relationship with, my wife, and I think particularly with a sibling dynamic, especially an older, younger sibling dynamic, to have your younger sibling just say, this is all of me. And I've been scared to share that with you because I don't know how you're going to handle that. And for me to then have my knee-jerk reaction is to defend myself and tell them this is why I think that way. This is why I reacted that way, instead of just pausing and saying, you're right. I'm sorry. I could be better. And I love you despite all of that. And I hope you can love me despite my imperfections.
Yeah. The gift I want to give you back is to say to you, and really to anybody who is either in this process or getting ready to be in this process or has been through this process of speaking our unspeakable things or whatever, letting people in wholly, is as much as this isn't always the case, so I want to be really careful. I never want to be in generalities, but most of the time, as much as you are worried about how someone's going to react, there are people waiting. They don't know it like consciously, it's subconscious, are waiting for you to trust them enough, to see them as strong enough to give you those things. And many times they don't know that. They don't know that they've been waiting until the moment arrives. The gift we give people when we trust them with things that feels like it might break us, is that we blow strength in them. We don't see them as fragile, because what we do when we convince ourselves that we can't tell people is that we have decided the people around us are fragile. Right? Like when you don't tell your wife your whole self, you've decided she can't handle it. You've made that decision for her, right? And so that's why on the opposite side of that, I think sometimes it feels so powerful. The person always loved you. They didn't love you because or in spite of that thing that you're now telling them, right? Like that's just one set of choices or one set of like, it's not who you are as a person, right? Does it impact you? Yeah. Do we need to work through that? But like that says so little about your love if that thing, big or small, is going to impact all the other stuff that you've lived and done. And, like people are just stronger. They're just less fragile, I think, than people give them credit to be.
You just blew my mind again. But I want to lean into that.
Yeah.
Like that is so powerful to reframe that as the way you're stating it, to withhold parts of yourself from somebody is telling them they're not strong enough.
Oh yeah.
You're
it's not
not
telling them they're not strong enough.
Yeah.
It's literally saying you can't hold the space.
Yeah.
You can't hold the truth. You can't handle the truth. But in essence,
Yeah.
right? I mean, this is what I want more people to understand. I do. I want more people to understand that the power in your individual story, wherever you are in your becoming, is the most powerful thing you have to offer to anybody in your life,
Yeah.
right? Like wherever you are. You can't control anybody else. You can only control you. So the gift you give people by trusting them. Now, some people will disappoint you.
Of course.
Some people cannot hold it.
Yeah.
And usually that has nothing to do with you. It has to do with them. If their capacity is, their cup is full, good or bad, there's no way for them to receive, right? Like there has to be this letting go in your life of things. And this is why we do meditation. This is why we do yoga. This is why we do all these things, right? Yeah. Is to like, and in Buddhism, they call it empty the cup, let go, right? If you're not in a space of sort of letting go, you can't receive from other people. So if we happen to choose to tell our stuff to people that aren't ready, then we can either just decide that like we were dumb and we chose the wrong person, or we can decide that like, that's fine. They weren't right. Like we learn. This is why I think the better you have as a person to show up authentically and give people space, the more examples they're going to have that they can do it. Right. Like it only takes one person to poke your head back in the turtle hole for you to not come out for a long time.
Yeah.
And it takes a whole bunch of you sticking your neck out and being seen and heard and seen and heard and seen and heard to cover up for that one person, right?
Yeah.
So like we need to be that in with each other. We need to like put our heads out. We need to receive that. Like we need to just be doing this very vulnerable. I mean, this is the whole essence of what Brene Brown was talking about, right? And that vulnerability begets connection, right? It is the way. It's because like people can relate on becoming. Hardly anybody can relate on arrival, right? Like it's just like, no, who's arrived? And even the people we think have arrived, like if you peel back, it's like so messy, right? Like, and people who are really successful and know that they're still becoming, man, they're a joy to be around, right? Because they're ever changing and growing and trying to figure it out, right? Yeah. They even know themselves, like I have more, I can give more, whether that's money, time, whatever, wisdom, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I feel like there's two things I want to lean in on in what you just said. I'll talk about the second one first, where there's such a fine balance. We have this mentality. I'm a huge fan of The Greatest Showman, right? This is me, right? This is me. I'm proud of me. You know, if you can't handle me, you know, jump on the highway, right? There's that element of like self-confidence, but then there's I feel like you have to layer in willingness to be able to see your stuff too. Right. So it's like, there's two sides of that, of just like, this is me and I'm proud of me and I'm proud of who I am. And also I have work to do and I know I do.
Yeah.
Okay. Help me see where I need to do work. Right. And I think weaving those two together is where you can work on your stuff without feeling shame.
I would add a third part, because
please.
In the world that I sit in many times, whether as a therapist or not, this third piece is I am because of, and that is what we call like a victim mentality, basically. And like we could get really stuck in that as people. Like I am the way I am because of my ... parents.
Yes.
I'm the way I am because of the church. I am the way because of my previous relationship. Whatever it is, like I am the result of someone else's decisions, which basically is just like being unaccountable, right? Like I'm not trying to say that people don't get in circumstances that they don't make. That happens all the time, right? And unfortunately, some of those circumstances are just heartbreaking, right? And we ourselves and our agency and our ability, like if you get stuck in this even if it's not an actual circumstance, but in your brain, the prison of your brain, right? Or whatever, in the victim mentality, then like, where do you go from there? The story you tell yourself keeps being like a scarcity mentality, right? Like, because there's no room for growth. There's no room for self-recognition. There's no room. I get pretty comfortable. Like when you're in the victim mentality, there's no way to see it any other way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I think there's this like confidence of like, this is me, right? There's this like, I need to be growing and ever learning. Some people get really stuck in the self leadership, the self-help aisle of the world. Like, you know, lots of my friends, we've just like shopped in the self help world for years. We just love it. We're spinning it. I remember one of my friends saying, man, I think I'm addicted to like self-help. This is not also good to just be like ever like there's something to be said about people who get to a place where they feel fairly content, right? Like, and can just be grateful for what they have. If you're always building, always growing, always producing, then how do you ever look back and are you looking around and are you able to like smell the roses, we call it, right? So these three pieces I think are really interesting to look around. There's more, right? But to look around in our lives and be like, am I a victim of my circumstances? Am I a victim of myself? Do I see people as fragile? Do I like, if I tell my truth, have I created enough people around me that like I will survive telling them, right? It's like someone who's coming out for the first time. It's like, I would tell people, don't ever come out unless you feel that the ground is safe underneath you. It doesn't make sense to do it if you're not, right? Like, so part of this process is picking people. It sounds like your brother, it sounds like your wife, like, you had enough evidence previous that they could hear hard things. Maybe they even weren't from you. Maybe they're from other people, or maybe it was just in the conversations that you had the back and forth, right? There was a little bit of an ability for you to say, I'm going to try this. I'm going to test this. I'm going to trust you, right? Yeah. And then it seems like there was an abundance of like reception. It seems like there was enough good that you're sitting here and you're publicly saying it, right? Like, I'm guessing, this is my guess, is that like there was enough people that saw you, Braden, as just like Braden. They've always seen you as Braden. They didn't see you, like they didn't see the stain on your soul like you saw it, right? Or yeah. And I think,
but it's been an astronomical amount of work.
Yeah.
And I feel like it, like, you know, for people listening or viewing, like, it's not just I come and I share my vulnerable parts of me, you receive it, and it feels so great, right? There are some raw parts where it's like, this is a raw part of me, and they're like, okay, wow, I need to handle that for a little bit, right? And for me to then continue to look inwardly and say, you know, I know in the past I said, this isn't a part of me, and I'm sorry. You know, it's like, tell me more about what you're seeing in me that is not nice, you know, and like being willing and open to receive that, I think is big. I see you opening the book. I have one more.
Yeah, please. No,
so the other piece, you know, we're talking about, okay, so let's consider somebody who's maybe listening, who's like, listen, I want to be vulnerable. I don't know how. Right. So it's like, I love what you said about like, okay, so I'm trying to like workshop in my head, what are some like practical ways, and maybe you know this as a therapist, to be able to welcome that piece, to be able to say, I'm thinking as a preface to be like, hey, listen, I see you as somebody strong enough to know a part of me that's I'm scared to share.
Perfect.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, like there's a sentence you could say to preface whatever you want to share in order to truly connect with somebody. Now on the opposite side, so maybe that is one, and I'd love to know if you know more sentences to say, like, this is a great way to preface being able to be open and be vulnerable, to prep that person to receive whatever you're about to say.
Yeah, I would say one. So that was a prescribing, right? Like, I'm telling you that you're strong enough. The problem with that might be that they are maybe not.
Which is my follow-up question.
Right?
What happens when they're not?
So I mostly steer clear of telling people how they should be or show up or think. Like, we don't have any control of that, right? What we have control over is how we're going to say it, and we can ask people how we want them to respond. Not what they're going to say, but how we want. So, for example, you can say, I'm really nervous. I'm going to tell you something that I've been really working hard to try and figure out. And I feel like you're a safe person that I can tell this to. But because I'm really nervous about how it's going to be received, it would be really helpful for me if you just listened and didn't really say anything for a little while.
Wait till I'm finished, please.
Yeah. That's one way. I think then there's this thing that why people don't tell people in person, why they tell them in text or why they tell them in emails, even though they know they should, is that people understand that like it's hard for people to not show their feelings on their faces and on their bodies. And that people usually know, like, just because I react in a certain way, that's not how I really feel. That I need to percolate. I need to think, right? So like giving people permission to sort of feel their feels and think about things for a little bit before they need to respond, or that they don't need to respond at all, unless another version of that's less about like even if you're not going to say like deep addictions or deep things, right? Even if you're just going to try and tell somebody something so they can hold it with you, but you don't want them to fix you, same thing, right? Like I'm going to have a different conversation with you than I normally have, because like I want to tell you some things that have been on my heart. And for this conversation, because I know you have so many good ideas and you're really awesome and everything, and like I trust you, and many times when I come to you, we're like spinning and we're generating ideas. But for this conversation, I'm just telling you because I trust you and I just want you to hear. Like you're just taking the opportunity to help that person understand where you are in your readiness. If you don't tell people that, they're sort of left to flounder with like whatever they think is the best way to respond, which most of the time is not good. I'm just going to say that. Most people do not respond well. Like even at their best. It's how people respond with grief. They're just terrible at it. People don't know because people don't know how to hold pain. They can't hold their own pain. We're like very addicted to like being pain averse, right? Like
of course,
we're like numbing it out everywhere. Even in good ways, we're numbing it out, right? Like even in positive things people are doing, they're sort of numbing out real pain or conversation. So even if we love you and they show up, it's like you're telling them something very painful, very disruptive in their life, very like, especially if it's relationship based at all. It's like, ooh, this affects me, right? Like this has, it's really hard to like know how to do that. And it's hard because then you feel responsible because somebody's opening up to do it right. Right? So the gift you give somebody a little bit is to sort of work it out ahead. Like what's the ideal way that you want them to like receive this information. Again, you're not telling them how to think or even what to say. You're just telling them this is how I want it to go. It's sort of like giving someone an outline to a book or a table of contents. It's like, we're going to have this conversation. I'm going to talk about some things. I just want you to listen at a certain point. You know, we can maybe talk more. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I don't know how I'm going to feel. Like, it's just like any version of the realness of it. Right. And depending on the person that's sitting across from you, you would better know how to like curtail it, right? Or even how to do it. I tell this story on a podcast. It's like with my best friend, Allison, where she had been going through a divorce and she had like had lots of like problems. And for years I had been kind of just like her stalwart friend. Right. And I think for a long time in our friendship, she just saw herself as, I don't want to say that this is how she said, but like saw herself as maybe the like problem or like the person that needed help. Right. That she saw me as like the person who was like, had it together, which is not true in either of those situations. Right. But there's this sense of when you're like giving and you're in a bad place that you're pulling from somebody. Right. So one day we were driving and maybe because we're driving and we're sitting next to each other and I wasn't looking at her, maybe because I just like was overwhelmed, I started crying and I was telling her things about my life and she just lost it. And we were sitting next to each other and she said this thing that changed my life when it came to my friends. Because I lived a lot of my life as people see me as the person who like gets it and knows it, as a therapist, as a listener. And like, and when I would tell people I had problems, they would sort of turn it back around to themselves because that was the part of their relationship and our relationship that I had created. Like I'm the listener and you're the talker. And so they didn't really know how to be the listener because I had done this so often. Right. So I'm sitting here telling her, and she just like cried and she's like, I've been waiting so long for you to trust me. Like, I've been waiting so long for you to, it didn't matter what I was going to say. She's just like wanted to be seen as the that she could hold it, that she could
Yeah.
keep it, even if she wasn't 100% like, and the thing that I learned that was so sad and such a growth edge for me was that I never saw her. I never thought of her as incapable. It was never her problem. It was a me problem. It was just that like, I don't have any reason to like, I'm so blessed. I have so many blessings. I have this, I have this. Why, like my pain is small compared to other people's pain. It's, pain is relative. And this is the thing. But I realized that I actually had missed a bunch of opportunities along the way to like, just let her in. I'd missed it. So like I, from that moment forward was like, no, we're going to have just this very open, whenever I need thoughts or advice, I'm going to put it on the table. If you can handle it or have ideas, great. If you can't, like, we'll just recognize it. And that has been wonders in our relationship, because there have been times where I'm having problems or I'm struggling with things that's not relatable to her or she doesn't get it.
Yeah,
and she'll just say like, love you. She doesn't try to fix me.
Yeah.
And I can tell like, maybe not it's not mean. It's just like, this is not the space. Like somebody else in my life or something else, or like, I say to people all the time, like you're spilling your poison. It probably needs to go somewhere like a therapist, or it needs to go somewhere where it's not your friends and your family or your wife or your spouse or your kids. Right. So it isn't our job to like decide necessarily like how people are going to respond, but it is our job to like kind of know the people around us to know if we're safe, because we want to set ourselves up to have the best experience we can if we're going to be vulnerable. Right. Like, so like, stack the deck, I guess we could say, if that makes sense.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah. The quote that I wanted to share with you actually has to do with this topic. So this is on my top 5, definitely top 10. It's called Tuesdays with Maury, and it's by Mitch Albom. Long story short, it's a teacher, kind of who mentors this writer, and years later he's dying, and the writer comes and he meets with him on Tuesdays, and he's kind of just like writing about his life, and this is the book about his life, and so it's about the stories that are meeting. But in the chapter called The Sixth Tuesday, we talk about emotions, is what it's called. I'm going to read 2 parts. The first part says, quote, "But by throwing yourself into these emotions, by allowing yourself to dive in all the way, over your head even, you experience them fully and completely. You know what pain is. You know what love is. You know what grief is. And only then can you say, all right, I've experienced that emotion. I recognize that emotion. Now I need to detach from that emotion for a moment." So this is one side. I feel it. I see it. It's too much. Like I need to just like do something about it. Right. In my opinion, most people like numb it, push it, eat it, right? Whatever.
Self-medicate it somehow.
Maury's approach was the exact opposite. Turn on the faucet. Wash yourself with the emotion. It won't hurt you. It will only help you. If you let the fear inside, if you pull it on like a familiar shirt, then you can say to yourself, all right, it's just fear. I don't have to let it control me. I see it for what it is. So I want to just ask you, when you hear these 2 scenarios, or when you see these 2 things, what do you think? And what's your experience on either side of that?
This is a lifetime journey for me, because number one, when we experience negative emotion or pain in emotion of some kind, right, our brain goes to a little bit of fight or flight, right? So we are programmed as human beings to fight or flee pain. Sometimes it's painful emotion, and it activates the same parts of the brain, right?
Or freeze.
Or freeze, yes. Oh, thank you. Yes. Yeah. And for me, that was very much a large part of my whole life. I'm feeling this negative emotion. I need to get rid of it somehow instead of being present with that emotion. Yeah. That includes in recovery and addiction, right? So people who've been in programs hear lots of acronyms. One of my favorites was BLAST: bored, lonely, angry, stressed, tired. So being able to identify what the emotion was, and then I was taught to address the emotion and not resort to addiction. Great stage 1. What if we just felt it?
You know me, I'm a marinade in it.
So with that, I have a life coach, and I'm trying to remember his name. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Somebody I worked with who, I'm going to feel really bad that I can't remember his name because he's been so great.
No worries, we can tag him later.
Yes, please. Danny.
Okay.
His name's Danny. Danny has an experience. It's very widely known. He shares it on lots of podcasts, but his wife was unfaithful to him, and they ended up having a divorce. And then he went on a Buddhist retreat for 2 weeks. No phones, no nothing, sitting in a forest literally for 12 hours to feel everything, not just the baggage that you were carrying, but like, I'm sitting on a rock and my rear kind of hurts and not moving.
I studied Buddhism for 18 months, and like the letting go of everything, which is basically the feeling, but like you don't control anything is wild experience.
Right. And I think that's so counterintuitive for us, especially as Americans, right? Yeah. That we are taught so much to like address negative feelings instead of being present with them. Kylee, I haven't figured it out. This part out. I don't have tips. I don't have tricks. You're living it. This is part of my becoming. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Is being able to say like, actually, no, I feel like I'm getting better. Actually, I think, I was laid off actually a couple months ago, in January. And I remember one day getting to a point where like, normally where I would be like grieving the loss of a job and feeling and like trying to address the anxiety. I like to apply for like 150 jobs a day. It helps me helps quotation marks.
You feel control of the situation, right? Because you're like, I've done everything I can,
right?
Yeah.
And then my beautiful wife is just like, "What do you need to feel this?" What a fascinating question to offer as a supporting individual. It's like not how can I support you overcoming this emotion? How can I
fix and get you the job?
How can I fix this? How can I help you feel what you need to feel? So it is a very common phrase we say.
We love you for that.
By the way, most of everything I'm citing in terms of like books, knowledge, everything, my wife spoon feeds to me because she is a lifelong learner. So it's all her fault. I know what I do. But being able to say, to say, what do I need to do in order to help you feel what you need to, which is a phrase we say to our kids all the time, right? My kids are just feel what you need to feel. And then being able to take a moment. I remember in an evening to take a bath, turn off the lights, turn on a candle. Again, one of those things it's vulnerable for me to say because it sounds very weird for me to be like, I like taking baths with candles, right?
Love it.
Turning on a meditation where the mantra of that meditation was, it's okay to feel this way. Yeah. And just for 20 minutes straight, just hearing somebody else say on my phone, it's okay to feel this way.
I want to say too, as adults, I talk about grief on a lot of podcasts and a lot of things that like as adults, in other cultures, they have these benchmarks or these things sometimes that you grieve in our American culture, we really have like death and marriage and like, we don't have very many rituals around like different things in our lives.
Yeah.
And so loss is a really interesting thing. And especially in a world where most people don't make enough money to just like prolong the ability to not have a job, right? They have to like scoop up a new job really quickly. We like don't have the ability to sort of sit and percolate on like what we learned and what we want and what we don't want. Like when we break up in a relationship and we're like, before we go to the next relationship, we're like, I don't want these things and I do want these things, right? Yeah. So sometimes in that space of just like trying to get the next thing or do the next thing or whatever that is, if it's not a job, I've talked about this in a couple of podcasts, the desire to be a mother was just so strong for me. And biologically that window is all but closed. And my process of going through that, like I just decided that I was just going to sit in it and grieve it and feel it, like all the parts of it. Because the alternative was just like I don't know the alternative because I didn't do the other side, but I imagine it would have been to make other decisions or to numb or to like tip to the side that was like, it doesn't matter. I have a great life, everything to justify the circumstances that came to my life, right? All of which for the most part were in my control, some of which weren't in my control. But like the justification tends to like help people get away from the grief, right? There's something really so amazing about feeling your feels, right? It's so simple to say. Something really amazing about sitting in that space that no one else can really fix or take or change, and that you need to be able to, I say, sit next to, sit with, like you don't identify as it, right? This is not the helpful thing. I don't identify as my grief, but it's like the thing that's with me or sitting next to me or washing over me. You know, we talk about emotions in therapy a lot about like riding the wave. Like we don't have to own them. They're indicators of things. Like what is it telling you? And then from that experience, you get to then say like, okay, what is it telling me? Do I need to pivot in my life for the job? Do I need to go make different decisions about being a mother? I'm just using these two different examples, right?
Yeah.
Like, am I empowered? Am I unempowered by whatever? You get to reevaluate what brought you to this situation. It's wild, right? What can happen in like, I'm not talking about months and years. I'm talking about one setting of just really feeling your feels and really grieving.
Yeah.
It's gifting, right? And then again, like this is the crazy thing about being ourselves and feeling and not numbing is that can't help but like pour out, right? Like you model that to yourself, and then you gift that to the people that are around you, and then that spills out into the people around them. And man, I just wish we gifted more to the people that are around us to just like be in your pain. It's hard to see people in pain, right? But it's also the most beautiful thing in the world when people really feel their feels, right? And we again are just way stronger than I think we give ourselves credit. Like we will survive it. Part of why I think people can't feel their feels sometimes is because they just think they will fall apart on a puddle on the ground, right?
Yeah.
Like if I let go of all these things that I've held so tight, I will just disappear. And what we just talked about in this whole podcast is the minute you let go of that control and give someone else an opportunity to see your wholeness, like you're better for it. It's the same way with this, right? Like the minute that you can just like really feel it, the fear turns into like the ability to handle it. And the reality is not nearly as scary or crazy as what we have perceived it to be, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like you glazed over such a huge part of you that deserves just some empathy for that journey you've been through. I mean, you talk about it. You've probably done a lot of work to go through like this desire to be a mom and the amount of processing and like I just want to sit there and acknowledge that for a minute, that you've probably put in a ton of work.
Yeah, thank you. And like the idea of being a mother for me specifically, the idea of being a mother has always been for people in lots of different hats, right?
Yeah.
That's always been a concept that I've loved that people have out there, right? You can be an auntie, you can be a this, but like on an individual level, I've had to do the work to figure out what that is going to look like. When I was single and like younger, it was like I wanted to get married young and be a mom young. And when I got older single, I wanted to like, I was like, maybe I can marry somebody who's divorced that has kids, but I don't know. And then I got to a place in my life where I was like, well, I think I want to have my own kids. And a lot of men that are divorced or widowed, they're done having kids. And so there's this weird moment. And then I had to grieve each of these levels at the point where I'm like, I just kind of want to marry somebody now who has kids, whether they're widowed or divorced, because I would still like to be a mom, right? Even if I don't birth my own children. But each of those levels, there were a lot of pain in arriving and then leaving those levels and having to go to the next level and kind of open up and broaden my perspective and be flexible in my thinking and like really sit in it and feel it. And then when the next level came, being like, I can't believe I'm at this next, like I never saw myself as this and then this and then this and then this. It's a wild, it's like an unpeeling of like, you know, the onion. I will say this, I'm also in that. I'm also in the grieving of like when like the door is closing on that for me. And, but it's also sometimes like relieving and like exciting to be like, okay, that is not going to happen. So you got to put energy into other things in other ways. And just like, you don't have control at a certain point. You made decisions that led you here, and you feel good about those decisions. Like you can look back and here we are, and you don't have control over biology. And so here we go. So equal parts, just like, so like devastating. That's this and right. And also like, what do you do with that? Like, do I sit in the circumstances and to become a victim of my choices or of my circumstances? Or do I have to like really feel it and really own it? Because I don't want to like brush it off. Right. And then pick myself back up and look around and see what I have to be grateful for, what I'm creating, what I'm a part of, and go from there, right? And I also don't have the answer to that, right? Like I'm living what I'm telling you right now. I will say this, like feeling my pain allows me to be really genuinely happy when I see a lot of people around me that aren't, as single people or as whatever, married people that aren't happy in their marriage, parents that aren't happy that have kids. Like, I think that part of just like feeling your feelings, like I had a friend at a wedding that came up to me and she's like an older mom with kids. And she's just like, I'm so happy that I'm away from my kids. And I was like shocked. I wasn't shocked, but and she just opened up and she's like, oh, all the things, right? That you just like her unspeakable things. Cause like, you're not allowed to not want to be around your kids as a mom. You're not allowed to, and it was so refreshing. It was so refreshing for me to hear her be like, I don't want to switch places with you, Kylee, but like, I don't also want to be in my place. And I was like, I hear you. I hear you. There are times when I'm just so grateful. And we just sat in the realities where we were. And I just think this, right? Like pain is relative to the circumstance that you're in. And the gift we give ourselves when we feel our pain is to truly feel where you are in your life, right? The only way to get to the other side of healthy is to like be in the mess. Yeah. Like if you try to skip the mess, like this causes bigger other problems. I mean, we're talking, this is where a lot of addiction comes. This is where a lot of definitely disconnects thrives in that, right? Like if I don't want to feel my feelings, there's a lot of ways that I can like become pain avoidant, right? All of which, none of those are usually healthy.
Kylee, thanks for, I want to be present with that. Like, thank you for sharing that part. And I want to be present with that moment. And I just unbelievably respect you for that journey that you've been through to feel those things. I think you said this, and one of the things we like to say in our family, it's not ours. I think it's simply on purpose. I believe that our Dr. Becky, as a parent, one of the parenting folks, says two things are true, right? And that's absolutely okay. So and I think you're hitting on something huge where not only do we need to sit with those emotions, but we need to give ourselves permission to feel those emotions, right? So it's like, I'm not allowed to feel angry or to feel relieved and excited to not be around my kids and not to be a parent. Yeah. Two things are true. I like being a parent, but I'd also kind of envy you. Yeah. And that's okay. Right. And so I think what you're describing is huge, to not only feel those negative emotions, but again, that mantra from that meditation I did, it's okay to feel this way.
Not only is it okay, I think it's important, right? Like I just want to say, like, if you're not carving out space in your life, if you don't have enough space in your life to feel your feelings, your life is too full. Yeah. Even if it's good full, right? Yeah. Like we got to like figure out what we got to take off the table so that we can actually be present in our emotions, right? Like if our circumstances in our lives are so stuffed with all the things that we sort of need to do to check the boxes that we can't actually feel or be, then we've done we have in essence created, we haven't begun with the end in mind. We've sort of just like fallen into the circumstances and the patterns that we have, right? We need to, you need to be able to be like, gosh, I want to go and be away and do myself. I'm an individual, even when I'm a parent, even when I'm I was born an individual, I'm going to die an individual. And like, that doesn't like, the new relationships or the new circumstances or the job or the thing, those are hats that I wear, but they don't all define me. And so to be able to like taste the eggs and figure out who I am is like an ongoing process. And in that process, there's a letting go that's gotta happen, right? Like letting go of things that aren't serving us, a letting go of things that like we thought we wanted that have changed, a letting go of beautiful things that like only last a certain amount of time, right? Like I think that letting go allows you to empty your cup, like your friend that went and studied, Buddhism, so that you can put in more, right? We rarely think about what we get when we let go, because we're like the monkey in the jar. We just want to hold so tight to what we have and what we know, right?
Yeah. And then my job as the receiver of that is to not begin a sentence with, well, at least.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's our knee-jerk reaction. Again, this idea of feeling those emotions. And I think oftentimes as a receiver of people's vulnerabilities and of people's oh, what did you gave it a good name where it's like those inner parts of all of me's, right?
Yeah.
When you're giving that to somebody, is to not try and fix and not sit there and say, well, at least you get to do this cool podcast, Kylie,
Yeah.
and you have the time to do it. You know,
I'll be
well, at
honest,
least-
I don't
yeah.
really want to talk that much about my vulnerable spaces and pain spaces
Yeah.
because I have an abundance of goodness, because I've created abundance of goodness. Like
Yeah.
I was an active participant in that, right? Like because I was single, I was able to really, and that's just why I want to have this podcast and tell people like you have way more control of your belonging place than you think. It's not about your circumstances. It's not about like the church or this or that. Like you can actively tap in and tap out people and things and situations, right? Part of why I got to be really good at that is because I was single for so long.
Yeah.
I had to remake friends and let go of friends and move and have a job. And like, I had to become really resilient in like liking me and who I was. I'm the common denominator in my life. Right.
Yeah.
And to be safe enough to feel my feelings and to really fall apart and to just know that like, I have a lived evidence that I will not fall apart in a puddle in a hole and never recover. Like I've done enough really deep grieving that says on the other side of this, there is ABCD, right? Like, and because I can sit with the other side and also, you know, I think, but there are many times that my biggest fear, it just comes back to the beginning of the conversation. I have the same as everybody else, is that if I start to tell people these big grief spaces, that they are going to respond with, but look at all the things that God's let you do or that you could do because you were single, that's going to be their response. And that is true.
It is.
And some of that, what God was able to do with me, I get frustrated about because I haven't always wanted to be the instrument in the hands of other people's growth, right? Like, and I know it sounds like terrible to say, but that's my truth. And that's the truth you don't get, that you take away from people when you decide that the story that they're living is the best or the good or the thing, right?
Yeah. Only
I get to decide that I'm still on plan A. And that is what I'm trying to figure out. I've always been saying I'm on plan F, G, H, I, right? I'm back to this place where like I never left plan A. Now that has been a journey to get back to this place of like, I'm right where I always was meant to be because I always have felt like I'm off the path, right? Like I'm not doing the thing. But like, that's to say that everyone has the same path. And I've just decided a long time ago that like, we all have different paths and we all have different timing. And as long as you're doing the best, I call it building the kingdom. As long as you're building the kingdom in this space where that you were given, then I think, and you can do it as messy and as happy and as like organic or as good as, there's times and seasons for everybody. I think that's all we're here to do, right? Like that's the best we can give is our authentic selves, right? And my hope is that, and my hypothesis that's coming true episode after episode is that's the gift we give is our story, right? Our lived experience. And the more vulnerable we get with that, the more inviting and permission giving it is to everybody else around us. So, I
want to tag along on this journey that you're going through. You don't want to say a sentence of like, well, at least, right? The things that you've experienced and the things that you can celebrate in your accomplishments. It does not take away your grief.
Yeah.
That does not invalidate what you are going through even now.
Yeah.
I get emotional because, honestly, Kylie, like it's trying to put myself in your shoes. I love my kids.
Yeah.
I would hop in front of a bus any day for them. They give you superpowers, right? And so I feel for you and long and hope for you to experience that joy. And it's hard to. I mean, being a parent is one of the hardest things, if not the hardest things that's out there. Again, that might be invalidating to other people's hearts.
I think it's like, but
it is challenging. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have a front row seat to that, right? As a therapist that works with families and parents and kids. And part of the grief that I carry that I don't ever want to get rid of is that I and that I hope I never lose. People ask me every once in a while, if I've just figured out that I don't want to be married because I see how bad it is, and I see families, and I was like, no, like there's a part of me that like longs for the growth that happens that you can only get in relationships like that, right?
Yeah.
There is a special growth that happens in these sacred relationships, and I love love, and I hope I never lose. Like part of grieving is to like keep your heart open enough that you're going to be hurt, but not so open that it's like bleeding out, right? Like finding that balance is difficult. I think part of the belonging place for me is trying to figure out that balance and like in how you interact with other people's lives, and how do we do it? How do we hold ourselves vulnerable enough that it connects, but not so vulnerable that like, there's this like vulnerability hangover that happens sometimes where it's just like, oh, I need to protect myself too. And I need to make sure I'm safe. And I need to make sure that, we don't, the pearls before swine, that we're not sort of giving the best of ourselves to people that aren't ready or haven't done the work to receive it. Right.
Yeah.
Well, my concluding question is, basically anything. The question is basically, what does belonging mean to you? But the way I want to frame it, Braden, is anything that we didn't get to say from the prompts that I sent you before, or when you've been thinking about being on this podcast, like, or whatever you want to leave sort of, that hasn't been spoken. Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, it's been awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I almost don't feel like we're in a studio talking. It's just like two friends, at dinner or something. Belonging is huge. So I think here's the kind of like personal part of my identity in terms of belonging. Let me ask you this. So 2017 Surgeon General declared an epidemic of loneliness, right? One of the things I like to say is we are connected as human beings more now than we ever have been in the history of humankind, but we are horrible at connection. I know, connected, doing thumbs on the phone, right? We are connected, but we are really bad at connection, right? And truly what I believe is simply because we've lost the skills that we used to have in how to form connection. We simply just don't know how to anymore. So that message I start with is kind of doom and gloom, but it doesn't have to be that way, right? It doesn't have to be that way. Creating a sense of belonging begins with starting with curiosity, right? Where you're genuinely interested in the human being sitting across from you at that table. And that sense of belonging becomes like, I don't care who you are, what political beliefs you have. I don't care. I don't care is a bad word to say. I wish I could say I don't care, but like in a judgmental way. Like I'm not sitting here to ask you. I care about what you believe, but I don't care in the sense that I want to pit my own beliefs against yours. I'm just genuinely interested in who you are as a human being.
And I care more about what connects us than what disconnects us, right?
Right. Yep. I remember as a missionary, I would have a conversation with a Jehovah's Witness, and I'd say, if I start this conversation, I want to end it as better friends than we started. And I want to be able to share and find commonalities that we have between each other than differences. Can we have that conversation in mind as people that, I wasn't in it to bash or Bible bash is a big, frame. And I think as we, the media today highlights the differences between people because it's what gets emotional reaction is our own fault because we click on the things. If we keep clicking on things, they're going to keep producing stories that way. I believe it is a skewed version of humanity itself. And that as we belong, we lead with curiosity. And I really, really hope that just we can talk about all of the nitty gritty skills that we can in a human connection, how to ask good questions, how to be able to listen and respond with empathy, how to be an active listener and not listen to respond, and all of those things. But truly, if we take away anything from today's podcast in terms of belonging, it's like start tomorrow with curiosity about that person in front of you.
I love that.
Yeah.
We did talk a lot about lots of tools. We gave a lot of examples in this podcast, though, about how to create belonging and how to create connection. I do have one last question.
Please.
Okay. So you gave your first, I think, paid keynote speaker today, right?
Yeah.
Which in your journey of, when we started at the beginning of this, you talked about wanting to be a speaker and asking a mentor. And Okay, so Braden, you are on the beginning of a journey that I'm sure is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
But let's say 5 years from now, you're doing whatever you're doing in addition to speaking, but you're still speaking. Maybe it's your full-time gig. I imagine you're always going to have things on the side, and you're always going to be doing music and all kinds of things, right? Being a dad, and your kids are going to be how old in 5 years from now?
6. I'm going to use fingers. Ready? Vulnerability. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So 11, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 and
I love
11.
this. I use my fingers too.
Yep.
8 and 11. Okay. So very different ages than they are right now in their life. And you get the opportunity. Someone big calls you and says, open invitation to speak on any topic that you want to talk about. You're the keynote speaker. Not even going to tell you what the conference is about, because we want you to bring whatever you're the most passionate about in this moment. And you decide you want to speak on what?
Yes. Do you hear this giddiness?
Yeah,
Because I'm just like, when you start out as a
maybe it doesn't even have to be 5 years. Maybe it's like a year from now. But I'm saying after you've done enough speaking. Yeah. Right? Like that you're no longer like so excited that someone's asking you, but you're like ready to find platforms that are bigger and more important. There's a shift when it comes to anybody doing their thing, right? Yeah. Like when there was a shift when I was on enough podcasts as a guest, and then I decided I wanted to be a host. There's a shift. So I'm talking about post shift, when this is no longer like a new thing for you, and you no longer see yourself as like a new speaker. You've been speaking, you've been doing it, right? Like, what do you want to speak on?
It's happening this summer. So I'm writing a new keynote. This is
Perfect.
the keynote, and I'm going to pilot it at Aspen Grove. They've invited me to speak.
That. Okay.
So I'm just like, I'm going to do it, and you can't do anything about it. And they're not paying me anyway. So
perfect.
It is along the lines of finding your voice.
Okay.
So we haven't talked a lot about my musical journey, but my musical journey is kind of entirely by accident, right? It's just like I kept auditioning for things, and I kept getting into stuff, and I've been able to share my voice with the world. I truly, and again, I said this at the beginning, but truly, music does what words alone fall short of, and fills that gap. And so when you want to communicate a message, I'm not a good actor. I've done some theater stuff. I'm not a good actor. I'm good at singing the words of a song more than the note of a song. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm going to weave in music into this journey of me finding my musical voice, and finding and to leave audiences inspired to go find their own voice.
Ooh,
whatever that is, right?
Love that.
So we're gonna sing together. We're gonna do that because that's how I found my voice, and hopefully, I don't know if you know Jason Hewlett. He was so gracious just to have a phone call with me and talk about his musical journey and how he weaved it into keynote speaking, and that has inspired me to write this keynote. So a keynote at some point. Will be out there. It's the one that's closest to my heart. It's on this whole journey of finding myself, of letting go of the nice guy and letting go of people pleasing, and finding my voice, right? So we're going to find our voices together, and I love music, so we're going to do it through music.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's already a plan. It's already a seed that's been planted.
Yeah.
Do you have a website, or if people want to follow you on your journey, where is the best place for them to do that?
BradenEads.com. Follow me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active. So
we're going to put all of your links and everything in our liner notes, but I just wanted to make sure people. So again, the website is
BradenEads.com.
Okay, your name.
Easy.
That makes it easy.
Yep.
Braden, thank you for coming in from Colorado.
Yeah.
Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story, and mostly thank you for being my friend.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kylee. It's been awesome.